Hi everyone, just some quick advice here. I've been showered with comments by people who miss my uploads since the notification system is now broken and YouTube is suppressing uploads that don't get monetized. If you're experiencing this issue, just look in the video description where you'll find a jolly angry foreigner app to help you out. Or you can just use the default clock app on your smartphone that everyone has. I'll explain how to do it below. This way you won't have to rely on YouTube's buggy notification system for updates, and it works great with websites and podcasts as well. You'll also find donation info in the video description if you want to help keep this channel going. If you can't donate but still want to support the channel, then like, share and comment works tremendously as well, since that makes my channel show up more in feeds and recommendations. Likes don't really have anything to do with what you like anymore. It's now become a mere tool to fine-tune your preferences and home feeds and show support for channels that are struggling. So keep that in mind. Thank you for watching and enjoy the video. Hello everyone! I heard that disaster porn is a big thing on the internet, so let's take a look at how the fine country I'm living in is preparing for Corona. Sweden refuses to do health checkups at airports because contagion risk is deemed to be very low. Children with Corona-sick parents are forced to go to school anyway, because Sweden has a public school duty. Numerous schools have shut down because of the coronavirus, but the Public Health Agency of Sweden is highly critical and argues that schools should be kept open. State epidemiologist Anders Tegnell says he doesn't understand what these schools are doing. Okay, so when it comes to skipping school over climate change protest, Swedes think it's the most awesome thing ever, but when it's a matter of public health, you couldn't give a shit less? State media journalist says, think of all the apartments that are gonna be available when old people die. And if a lot of old people die from Corona, then we'll finally have jobs available. I'm starting to think that this virus is God's gift to all the millennials. Well, that explains why Sweden isn't doing anything. They finally got the chance to get rid of all those evil, pesky welfare recipients whose poverty and suffering is making the country look bad. Gotta look after that Sweden image, comrade. Sweden now has the poorest senior citizens in all of Scandinavia. Sweden is also more sensitive about their public image than the popular blonde in Mean Girls, so it's pretty easy to put two and two together here. After all, actions do speak louder than words, Miss Aryan Health Policy. A professor at the Department of Risk Management and Social Protection told media, society will keep working even if a lot of people get sick. We don't talk about Corona at my work. Might sound horrible to you, but shit happens. People die all the time anyway. End of quote. Yeah, you know, this really isn't a unique attitude since Swedes refuse to talk about a lot of things. You're not exactly known for having a open, transparent, healthy debate climate. The whole country operates like Johnny Tightlips.
Johnny Tightlips, can you see the shooter?
I see a lot of things.
Our leftist government has consistently chosen to sacrifice the social security nets of old people in order to import new, younger, fresher citizens. This is profitable for our upper classes in a variety of ways, as I've covered before. But because of this, they also completely lack the ability to handle a corona outbreak, since our overpopulation policy gave us a hospital crisis. For years, I've been reading about people with cancer dying from the waiting lines, not the actual cancer, and Swedes are such dumbasses, they can't even grasp how infrastructure works. More than once I've been laughed at when I described the past decade's migration policy as overpopulation. Overpopulation is when you take in more people than there's medical staff, employment, and police available per capita. We now also have a police crisis, which I'll make a video on in a few weeks. Point being, when your infrastructure isn't built for this amount of people, that's when your utopian welfare state crumbles. And we've been saying it for God knows how long. And this is when we see some of the most disgusting headlines imaginable, such as, "My daughter killed herself and nobody cares." Because the psych ward is just one of many sectors that's overburdened with too many patients right now. The National Board of Health and Welfare refuses to release information on how many hospital intensive care rooms there are available for diseased corona patients. They argue that the issue could create panic if it was released, seeing as how there's less than 500 units designed to deal with these kind of outbreaks. Panic, huh? Or maybe it would just make people stop voting for the parties who created this mess for us. 20 years of politically correct incompetence is what paved the way for where we are right now. You see Corona constantly being compared with the flu, but the flu has been around for 2,000 years and many humans have developed natural immunity to it. We also have vaccines. This isn't the case with Corona, where some doctors fear it might mutate, and it also has a significantly higher mortality rate. That's why experts are telling us to expect more deaths. Here's the thing about Corona. I understand that mass panic is bad, and it hardly prevents the spread of disease when people flock in large gatherings at the mall to buy 20 packets of toilet paper each. Hysteria can certainly be counterproductive, and I get that certain media outlets are exploiting the situation with crazy headlines. But do you really want to kill off your grandparents over a political issue like free movement? Why not just do a little containing here, and we can take care of our society's most vulnerable? And just because most people aren't at risk doesn't mean it's morally justifiable to ignore those who are. I'm not concerned about myself. I'm concerned about my grandma. I'm concerned about my family members over 50, since that's where the actual cutoff line for danger is. And I'm concerned for the young people with immunodeficiencies who aren't equipped to handle something like this, like my friend with anorexia. While all you leftists can do is be as disgustingly selfish as possible, as usual. China could have prevented 95% of cases had they acted sooner, but this is a lesson Sweden refuses to learn from. And this is the danger of having such a good Sweden image. When the whole world tells you you're the best country on earth for 20 years straight, maybe it'll gonna get to your head a bit. Denmark, Norway, and Japan shut down all their schools to protect against this pandemic, but Sweden wants to pretend everything is perfect as usual, because it's so important to the Swede to prove that they're better than everyone else. The whole country essentially operates like a constipated rich kid family that refuses to let their public image crack. Parents are pissed that a school forced their children to attend due to demands from our public health department, despite the fact that many of their students had recently traveled to northern Italy. But our government assured them it's all safe. Then a student got infected, then parents got pissed off. Only afterwards did the school actually shut down. Shows how much you can trust a leftist government. Sweden's former state epidemiologist actually said that it would be good if as many children as possible get infected, along with their parents, so Sweden can build up herd immunity. Meaning if 60% of the population would get corona, old people would be safer, since that 60% would develop immunity. Which is absolutely insane and just what you'd expect from a Swede. They say the key is to protect high-risk groups from this process, when everyone knows that's impossible. A fundamental part of herd immunity is vaccines, which don't exist yet, and if you had corona once, you can have it again. So it's hardly a guarantee with immunity. But give it a few months and the people responsible will take back everything, say they've been naive, and Swedes will be dumb enough to believe them and forget, no matter the cost, as per usual. Our current state epidemiologist started out denying that this is Sweden's strategy, since the government doesn't want to take responsibility for thousands of deaths. But then he changed his mind within a day or two, as he's flip-flopped on so many other things, so now he's saying, quote, "We didn't want to use that word at first, because it kinda has the vibe of giving up, and that's not the case here at all. But yeah, that is our goal. There is no other way to control this virus." End of quote. Britain was about to do the same thing as our public health agency recommended, but they abandoned this strategy when they realized it would result in 250,000 dead. Sweden, however, doesn't care. When informed about this, they just say that, oh, well, it's not really sure. It's uncertain that would be the result. What's happening in Britain isn't relevant to Sweden, Anders Tegnell says. Which is what you would expect from a narcissistic elitist Swede who thinks that they're the best at everything all the time. This is the danger of constantly referring to Sweden as a utopia. You don't think it's gonna get to our government's head eventually? Our state expert has flip-flopped between different positions several times over during this whole crisis. He actually said the virus wouldn't spread outside of China, and that it wouldn't come to Sweden, and that Sweden doesn't need to do any health checkups of people coming from China, since Sweden doesn't have direct flights between China, which turned out to be objectively wrong. But why care about facts when you're working for the government, right? He even told the media, quote, "It would have been a possibility to shut down schools if you got a vast pandemic going, like in Italy, but we don't have that in Sweden today. Herga durga," end of quote. Ever heard of preventative measures? How can you complain that Swedes are getting alarmist when you're not even taking the most basic ones? Then he coughs into his hands during a live press meeting. Coughing into your elbow is common sense. Instead, we got Filthy Frank here as our public health expert. If the guy can't keep track of his own hygiene, I don't get why he's responsible for everyone else's. But that's socialist nepotism for ya! On the plus side, countries like Israel and America are very quick with developing vaccines, but these may still take months to release due to testing. During that time period, the world could learn from Israel, Russia, and Singapore, who closed their borders and therefore have far less corona cases than European countries. Containment is a key factor here. Another key factor where Sweden has failed tremendously is resources. South Korea reports having passed their peak due to extensive test efforts, whereas Sweden spends all their money on migrants and leftist art projects. Then they get celebrated by insanely low-quality journalism like The Guardian, who spent this article praising Sweden for being super prepared, all because of a damn pamphlet that's several years old and has nothing to do with this. They're essentially praising the same state expert who's responsible for keeping our schools open. Yeah, no wonder people hate the mainstream media. You're so dishonest and stupid it's directly harmful. A doctor specializing in infections said Sweden could have stopped the virus from reaching their country altogether, making sure that no cases at all happen. But since they refuse to enforce flying bans, it's already too late. Another specialist explained that our healthcare can't be used to stop mortality. Instead, the only alternative is to restrict movement and contain the public infection. Another problem infection doctors have been warning about for a long time, to nobody's Swedish ears, is that Sweden makes itself too dependent on global access of medical equipment, which further puts us at risk. So yeah, people really underestimate the dangers of bad ideas. Now, China's shitty communism doesn't just endanger their own people, but also the entire rest of the world, and it's negatively affected the global economy. Given how many companies are set back because of this, and given how stock markets have been plummeting across the world. And yes, this is an utmost political issue, since censorship is what created this beast. Or rather, it's what gave the corona beast steroids instead of taking it to a vet to have it put down. Due to China's political correctness and culture of censorship, corona spread like a wildfire. Instead of putting the epidemic under control and letting it subside, the government clamped down on media and the internet, allowing it to spread and punishing anyone who talks about it. The same thing happened with their SARS outbreak, a disease which the government covered up for months before a whistleblower exposed the health crisis. And so this is what happens when you focus on appearances instead of quality. Typically leftist. Reminds me of how Sweden has been importing rape and then calling everyone racist to make them censor themselves. Not exactly a good public health policy there either. The whistleblower doctor who originally warned about corona is now dead from the disease himself. Instead of listening, the government detained him for rumor mongering, and his posts on social media were censored, as the government hurried to cremate bodies without any autopsies to hide the actual death toll. This made it very difficult to tell just how deadly the virus is. And now, after public protest became too widespread, China's central government is promising better transparency and aims to punish Wuhan officials who initially covered up the outbreak. But this is really sketchy, given they were only acting on expected standards from the state. What we're seeing here is not necessarily reform as much as it is a human sacrifice, given that hundreds of similar incidents play out every day across China and get rewarded. China also has a history of temporarily allowing press freedom and democracy, only to remember the dissidents and punish them later, eventually returning to the usual state of things. And now, in order to find the perfect date, we see Western leftists Tinder matching China's corruption with complete naivety.
But if you had to, would you close down the borders?
No.
World Health Organization chief said that travel bans are out of the question, as there's no need for measures that unnecessarily interfere with international travel and trade, aka business, when trying to halt the spread of coronavirus. So you expect us to die for globalism? It's disgusting what the corona outbreak has revealed about some people's outlook on humanity. That's what happens when money and politics matter more to you than people.